Okay, guys, I want to give it a couple minutes to go live. It looks like it is. So, welcome to tonight's Urgent Education. It has been a long time since I have done one of these. And in fact, I cannot remember the last time, so I apologize. I had completely forgotten that I had started this series until I went to the website, my website, to update it and realized, wow, I completely forgot that series. And I'm trying to, if you can hear me, I don't see it going live on my phone. And I just want to make sure that we are good to go. Let me ask my lady, make sure she can hear me. And until I hear from her, I will go ahead and start tonight's lesson. You can find the other two lessons on Destination Church Clovis.com or the Hub Training Center.com. And they're under the governmental training and origins of liberty. So we've got the first two. I highly recommend that you listen to those. Okay, so we're going to dive into the lesson. And what I wanted to encourage you guys to do is if you have any aha moments that stand out to you, to write those down, to note them, to do further research and education and share them with others, because we have got to restore the original intent of our founding fathers. And we've come a long way from what they originally had in mind. And I believe that citizens and especially Christians need to become engaged in the process of government in this country. One of the great revivalists, let's see, it was John Wesley, I believe, but it might have been Charles Finney, actually. I think it was Charles Finney. He said that any person who calls himself a Christian that is not involved in the political discourse and arena, at least, their voice being heard, is backslidden. So I thought that was a very powerful statement, a very strong statement. But anyway, I want to dive into the reason we are a constitutional republic, not a democracy. This is very important because you hear this a lot from even conservatives will say, to protect the democracy. But Democrats in particular, the media, other people who basically don't know why and how the government was formed, or they know and they don't care, they'll say we must protect democracy, right? Well, the constitutional, or America is not a democracy, it's a constitutional republic. And the reason why is our founding fathers knew that if we were a democracy, we would actually have mob rule. And that meant that the mob would overrule the will of Americans, and it would lead to the eventual breakdown of society, chaotic government, and then also weakness to withstand tyrants within the country as well as foreign tyrants and takeovers. And we'll get into how they set up the system, especially when it comes to the election of our leaders, as well, especially the president, as well as the three different branches. And some things I'm going to share about the Supreme Court may surprise you. So we are a republic, a constitutional republic. And I love this. Let me see if I can pull this up on Exodus 18:21. This is actually the verse that our founding fathers used to decide what would be the best form of government. Because if you remember, the founding fathers were British citizens to begin with. And they saw what tyranny does. They saw what absolute power did. And they were also, throughout their history, but also victims of government overreach as colonists in America. And so that's, what sparked us gaining our freedom. So the verse is in 1821. It says, "Moreover, you shall select from all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and placing such over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of 10." So that verse is the inspiration for America's government, our constitutional republic. So we initially had what was called the Articles of Confederation. This was the agreement that the 13 original states had with one another. And it served as a frame of government that was ratified by the states on November 15th, 1777. Of course, we won our independence in 1776. And it was called, quote, a league of friendship between the states. And in other words, just as a quick refresher, each state is considered a sovereign nation. And when they created the Articles of Confederation, each state was deciding, okay, as a sovereign nation, we will have a league of friendship with one another. Okay, a lot of people don't know that. And that was thanks to, I think he's this next one, Richard Henry Lee. And you will still hear the word state being used to refer to a sovereign nation. It's throughout Europe. We've got different places that it's used, but back then it was definitely used. And so a state is a sovereign government or a sovereign nation. So that means whatever state you live in, it's like its own little country. That's why we have our own government, and then we have our local governments. We have our own types of military, as well as police force, etc. Okay? But this was too weak to preserve the Union. And so Richard Henry Lee, he was the one that was behind the Lee Resolution that was the first most important document in our freedom from Britain, where they turned the colonies into states. And so that was July 2nd, I believe. And then on July 4th, we then did the Declaration of Independence, which was actually a legal document that listed the violations of Britain, or the king and his, in England, against our rights. And so he said that a Bill of Rights would, quote, serve as sentinels for the people at all times, and especially in those unavoidable intervals of inattention. Now, this is going to be important because there was a huge debate between whether to have a federal government or not. Because again, they were seeing problems cropping up with the League of Friendship. And so many of our founding fathers felt that it was necessary to have an Articles of Confederation in order to have a federal government. And they limited their power within specific spheres, which we'll get into. But there were anti-federalists that were afraid that if we have any federal government whatsoever, it was going to cause us problems and eventually try to take over. So Mr. Lee, he felt that we needed to have a Bill of Rights. And then Thomas Jefferson said, when all government, domestic and foreign, in little as in great things, shall be drawn to Washington as the center of all power, it will render powerless the checks provided of one government on another. Now, this is significant because we just had our 2024 election in which President Trump won soundly. And one of the things that he wants to do is decentralize the government. He moved the Land Bureau to Colorado. He wants to move a lot of the other departments to different states so that they're actually among the people and they are reconnected to American citizens. I've got family that lives in Alexandria, which is like 10 miles outside of D.C., literally across the Potomac. And it's a very insulated place. It's one of the wealthiest counties in the nation. And then, of course, DC is one of the wealthiest cities. And people there are very, the only word I have that would give you an idea is it's incestuous. Everybody is around there and they are, of the same mind. They work in the same places. And so they just see each other all the time. Their ideas become very centralized in DC. Plus, there's a lot of money to be made if you work in DC. And so President Trump wants to take the center of power out of DC into the states, which is a very wise thing, because when you live among the people and they're your neighbors, you will treat them different and you will create policies that will be different as well. And so the states delegated to the federal government, quote, few and defined powers by entering into what's called a compact, which is a legal term, or an agreement that is between sovereign governments, okay? So again, like I stated, the states, the United States, are little countries, and they have their own sovereign government. And so in order to, solve some of the problems that the League of Friendship was causing, they said, okay, let's enter into a compact. And the compact is the legal agreement between the states, and then their work product was the Constitution of the United States. So what this means is that the federal government was formed by the states, not the states forming the federal government, okay? So the federal government was formed by the states, and the states' powers are numerous and indefinite. This was very important because by saying that they are numerous and indefinite, it means that we have more powers and rights to make our own decisions than the federal government. But if you look at today, that's not the case. The federal government has become the overarching power of the people and the states, and this is out of order. So any government that is out of order is an anti-freedom government, okay? So the federal government was formed by the states, and the states' powers are numerous and indefinite. Hang on one second. I guess we lost power or something, because I don't know what's going on here. Anyway, sorry about that. There was a TV noise in the back and all kinds of racket. Okay, so Thomas Jefferson warned us that human nature tends to violate separation of powers, and we naturally gravitate to being politically centric. So a shift from local to federal will eliminate the powerful check and balance that we need, because again, they were British citizens and they saw kings overreaching in their power many times. I mean, we went through all the documents they created in the very first Origins of Liberty presentation I gave to you guys. So one government must put a check and balance on another. Now notice he didn't say branch. We have 3 branches of government. The 3 branches were not supposed to be the check and balance to one another. The local government, the state government, was the one that was supposed to be the check and the balance to the federal. The way the federal circumvented that, which I'll get into in a second, was by throwing money at the states. So once the states became dependent on federal income, the states began to lose their power. And so the states is the government that Jefferson was referring to. And basically he was saying it is the state's duty to check the federal government as a government that has the most power. So if we go back to the original presentations on this, the people have the most power. They then vote in their government officials in the state. So the states have the second power, and then the lowest power is supposed to be the federal government. But again, the federal government has very ingeniously figured out a way to get the states to cooperate. So a lot of you have probably heard of the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers. I'm reading the Federalist papers, and I have to have a dictionary near me. I mean, seriously, my phone, I got to go to dictionary.com because they used words that I'm like, okay, what exactly does that mean? What's interesting is the Constitution itself was written for the people, meaning there are a lot of them that didn't read at the time, or they didn't understand a lot of the words that maybe the founding fathers were used to. And so they wrote the Constitution and the Bill of Rights in very simple language for us. So in the 1780s, the Constitution was hotly debated. So again, the states were going to enter into a compact, and then their work product was the Constitution. The Federalists felt that the Constitution was needed to strengthen the federal government while at the same time protecting state sovereignty, but the Anti-Federalists felt it would give too much power to the feds and threaten American citizenry of the freedom they fought so hard for. So in the end, the Constitution was ratified in March of 1789, and then in June, James Madison presented the Bill of Rights to satisfy both sides, and that was ratified in 1791. Okay, so I want to read this. I forgot to get my Constitution little book, but I believe this is the very first sentence in the Constitution. Yeah. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Now, let me point out where the power grab occurred. So the job, their goal was to form a more perfect union, meaning we would be stronger, to establish justice because there were some shenanigans going on between the states, to make sure we had domestic tranquility within our borders, and then also provide for common defense, which meant they were to protect us from invasion, but also invaders from the inside, and then promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty. So the promote the general welfare clause, or little phrase here, is what the federal government used for a power grab. And I can't remember if it was James Madison or John Adams that was alive during this, but what they said is that promote the general welfare means that the federal government should provide and subsidize where they saw needed. So if you needed help with buying food, then the federal government should provide that help. If you needed help, bailing yourself out because your crops didn't do well, then the federal government should do that. And one of the founding fathers, again, John Adams or James Madison, he was alive at the time, a very elderly man, and he said, that is not what we're talking about there. We are not talking about the federal government taking care of the citizens like that. And he said, what this is a power grab. So it wasn't that long before the federal government used this clause in order to do a power grab. So that's how quick this happened. I mean, it was like, 1779 or 1789 or something like that. And then I believe this was like either 1790 something or like 18 something when this happened. So we didn't even have, 50 years before the federal government was doing their power grab. And so again, now we have subsidized schools, subsidized roads, subsidized provision for the citizens, subsidized libraries, subsidized banks, everything is subsidized now, and it has become a monster. But the opening statement here is what sets the boundaries and the focus given the federal government by the people. Then you have the three branches, okay? So remember, the governments are to keep the government in check, the state governments, not the branches, okay? And so the branches were to outline the different sections of the branches of government. And so we have the legislative, which is the most powerful, and they typically control the purse. So that would be the House of Congress and the Senate. And the House of Congress is the one that has control over the purse. And then you've got Article 2 in the Constitution, which defines the executive or presidential branch. And that's supposed to be less powerful than the legislative. And that's why executive orders, there's a lot of debate, but executive orders are actually a violation of how the Constitution has been written and the Founding Fathers. Unfortunately, presidents do it all the time, but they're basically like kingly decrees, and our Constitution has made that illegal because the Constitution is considered the law of the land according to our Founding Fathers. And so even presidents I like that have done it, it's still wrong. And then you have Article 3, which is a judiciary branch, and this is the least powerful of the three. So have you noticed that both the executive and legislative have had to take cases to the Supreme Court for the Supreme Court to decide, and that is out of order. That is not how it's supposed to be. The Supreme Court is not supposed to be the most powerful branch in the government. It's supposed to be the least. One reason for that is because in the judicial branch, especially the Supreme Court, they are lifetime appointed, right? And so they're not elected by the people. So the Founding Fathers always had in their mind that the most powerful should be those that are elected by the people. So the people are most powerful, the states, the federal government, and then the most powerful within the federal government are those that are elected, which is what Article 1 is about. This is why you get activist judges that do some really stupid stuff. Then you have Article 4 of the Constitution, which is the relationship between the states and between the states and the feds. Then you have Article 5, which is the amendment process of the Constitution. So if they want to add an amendment, it details how that must occur. And then Article 6 deals with treaties, and then you cannot give any religious test to serve in office. That's not supposed to be required. That's why the questioning of some of I think the last three Supreme Court justices was inappropriate because the Democrats were asking them about their religious affiliation and beliefs, and you can't do that. Now, Article 7 states that 9 of the 13 states were required to ratify the Constitution, which they did in 1787, and then since then we've had 27 amendments, and the last was in 1992. One of the amendments made income tax legal. So before a personal income tax, that idea was floated around even in George Washington's day. And George Washington said, "It is not right for me to put my hand in the pocket of another man." And the only time the federal government was allowed to take a personal income tax is if America was at war. So after, I believe, either World War I or World War II, they made the income tax a part of the Constitution by one of the amendments, which was another power grab. And it's really frustrating that we have to pay the federal government so much for stuff they didn't do, but that we worked for. And you might be wondering, well, how were they supposed to gain money? The states were to decide how much tax to collect from their citizens. And because they were elected, they were going to be prudent in their requests, right? And then they were to send a percentage to the federal government, and it worked fine. But there were other ways too, like tariffs. And all the baby crying about tariffs that Mr. Trump is proposing is ridiculous. Because of tariffs, we became the most wealthy nation in the world. We didn't even need income tax. We just needed tariffs. So I'd love to see the personal income tax amendment done away with. Now, the Electoral College. This is where people get a little bit fussy. So the Electoral College, it's outlined in Article 2, Section 1, Clauses 2 through 3, along with the 12th Amendment. Because remember, Article 2 has to do with the president. It says that the president is to be elected by the state's electors based on the qualities of the president that best suit the values and qualities of their state. So that was the first requirement. And then the second is the popular vote was to guide their vote. And so this then takes place January 6th. 270 votes are needed to win the election. So the way it is if a candidate wins the popular vote within a state, they get those votes, right? And the reason they did this, and they didn't go with the popular vote, is because the founders felt that was the only way to protect the sovereign state's interests equally. So, for example, you can see in our electoral map that California has a high concentration of citizens, as well as New York, Pennsylvania, etc. And then we have lesser populations like in New Mexico and Wyoming and Montana. So what the founding fathers knew would happen is if we went with a popular vote, that would mean that the will of the big cities like California and the states that have more population like New York and Philadelphia or Pennsylvania and all of those would supersede their will over the states that didn't have as many citizens. And this is important because if you look at all the states that Kamala Harris won, they don't require voter ID. And they're extremely blue or they're extremely corrupt. We don't know yet. And so can you imagine if California dictated that we would have to pick a president against our will in states where we're less populated, right? So that's why they went with an electoral college. So people that say we need to get rid of it on both sides, it's stupid because then we're going to go into mob rule, and we don't want that. So popular vote would demand that every state give up its voice and put mob rule in place. Okay? Excuse me. So Charles Pinckney said that by moving to a national popular vote, the president would also be moved by a few active and designing men. So what he meant by that is the most powerful in the state would try to corrupt the president, and the president would become his puppet. But when the people elect him, and then the electoral college makes sure that that person is for the benefit of the state, then we can have like a safeguard against that. So the Bill of Rights, it says the conventions of a number of the states having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers that further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added, and as extending the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the beneficent ends of its institution. Now, this is important. I always recommend that people read both the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Hang on, okay. So Amendment 1, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now, by the way, the freedom of the press is not what a lot of people think nowadays, where you've got the media or journalists. The freedom of the press was the right of every citizen to publish their opinions and ideas. And I believe that citizen journalism is actually going to restore order when it comes to the news and the narratives. Also, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And so there's been a lot of controversy over the well-regulated militia, but basically the Second Amendment is in place so that the citizens are armed and they can protect, number one, ourselves from tyrannical government, and then two, our personal property. And there's so much writing on that, and I've already done a whole series on that. You can listen to the Second Amendment series on We the Deplorables podcast. And then Article 3 is no soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law, because the Brits did that quite a bit to us. Amendment 4, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause. supported by oath of or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. This one was because of the writs of assistance, which allowed the Brits to just come in and take whatever they wanted anytime they wanted. And we also need to have this in a digital Bill of Rights, where they can't just take our conversations or shadow ban us and et cetera, et cetera. And this is also why the shutdown of businesses, et cetera, was against the Bill of Rights. And then Amendment 5, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, so that's why you can take the fifth, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. In other words, they can't just come take your property whenever they feel like it. Unfortunately, because of property tax on our properties, we never outright own our property. Just don't pay your property tax and you'll find that out. So if you hear the sarcasm in my voice, it's because it's present, because I think it's stupid. Amendment 6, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial, which is becoming a problem in this country, by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Number 7, it suits at common law where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. And then number 8, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, which is why the fine that was against Trump from that civil court was dismissed, because it was excessive, nor cruel and unusual punishments afflicted. Number 9, the enumeration of the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So that's an important one. It means that if it has not been explicitly said, that does not give the federal government the right to take away a right. So all of our rights are intact, even if they've not been written in this Bill of Rights. And then the final one is the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. So in other words, we have the power. Okay, so the Bill of Rights is actually a crucial document, and I'm so glad that several of the representatives and the people insisted on a Bill of Rights. So I want to leave you with some questions to ponder. Number 1, how did the federal government become the most powerful when it should not be? I'd love to hear your ideas if you want to comment or DM me. Why is the Supreme Court the last resort to protect rights when it should be the least powerful? And what is the solution to the centralization of government in Washington? So I want to say on the second one, I would say that the reason the Supreme Court has gained so much power is because Congress hasn't been doing its job. So remember, Congress is the legislative branch, but Congress in particular is supposed to come up with laws, and they're also supposed to control the purse. Because they've refused to put things in law, and they just do stuff willy-nilly, or people just do stuff willy-nilly in the government, it's now gone to the Supreme Court. So Congress needs to do their job. The solution to the decentralizing of the government in Washington, I think we're going to start seeing it before our very eyes, and I'm very excited because it is way, way too powerful over there. I mean, you can just tell when you're there. So invite others to watch this video. It will be on our YouTube. It's also going to be at destinationchurchclovis.com or the Hub Apostolic Training Center.com under governmental training. In fact, if you want to be equipped as a marketplace apostle, marketplace minister, I should say, I have several sections on the website that have different teachings on different topics to get you equipped. But again, this training is for both people that are of the Christian faith and people that are not of the Christian faith, because we are American citizens, and that is important to understand. We have been allowed freedom of religion. And so every citizen should know their rights and what the Constitution, our Bill of Rights, provide for us, right? Okay, guys, well, I hope this was helpful to you. I hope you've learned something tonight, and I should be here next month with another training.